The next thing that I said is that tariffs is not a good idea. Mass scale tariffs are not a good idea. So I think it's important to understand why I think that, but it's just my opinion. But I mean, we lost $1.6 trillion in the stock market today.
In a
So
day.
I guess a few other people feel that same way. But
Yeah. I think most economists felt that way. Right. Like if you watch and you studied economists, what they've been saying, even pre-election, right, when they were looking at economic plans and they were saying tariffs, like 29 out of 30, I think some percentage like that were like mass tariffs are a bad idea. Even Dan Ives yesterday was saying like after the rollout, this is worse than the worst case scenario.
well, another thing that I think is interesting is that there's really no rhyme or reason to this situation. Like even the explanation of how they decided the formula for the tariffs. No, we're still trying to figure that part
I
out.
looked it up. I looked it up. It's like some math equation. The New York Times put it in the publication. Even that doesn't, the equation doesn't make sense. I think the clearest way they're trying to say is that whatever that the United States is being charged, they're gonna give a reciprocal a tariff of half of that.
But that's not the case though.
I know.
And so they just made up they just made up random numbers and threw it at the board.
I got the board right here. You want to see the board?
Yeah,
Let's
let's
put
see
it
the
up. Let's
board.
put the board up. Let's put the board up.
Yeah. So I mean, just look at Japan, right? I mean, 46. Um, so 24 is not 50% of 46, right?
Right.
So it's just a bunch of random, like we're and Colombia is 10 for 10. So some countries they matched
Mm-hmm.
even. Some countries they did 50, some countries they did 30, some countries there's really no set rhyme or reason behind how they actually got these tariffs.
Yeah. Vietnam, 90%.
Okay. What I also said earlier on social media was that, a lot of people Trump's thing is that it's retaliatory. And they tax us, they have tariffs on us. So I think it's important to actually have some level of understanding. I said this on social media, but a lot of these tariffs was put in place after World War II
Mm-hmm.
when we were trying to actually help rebuild the world, really, but especially these Asian countries I mean, they was damn near devastated tremendously from the war, right? So that was a way. But America has the largest spending economy in the history of the world,
By
consumer
far.
economy.
By far.
And the amount of money that we actually spend on exports far exceeds the amount that amount of money that we spend on imports far exceeds the amount that we spend on exports. So we spend $3.2 trillion on exports,
Mm-hmm.
but around 2 trillion on exports. 3.2 on imports, 2 trillion on exports. So that leaves a 1.1, 1.2 trillion dollar deficit.
Yep.
So the idea of like an eye for an eye is not really a relevant conversation because we spend so much more on imports. And that's everything from cars to fabrics to furnitures to games, you name it. The biggest continent that we import products from is Asia.
Mm-hmm.
China is the number one country, and then
Mm-hmm.
after that is North America with Canada and Mexico. So what ends up happening is that when you have tariffs, let's say it's a board game that's coming from Vietnam and Walmart is carrying it. So Vietnam doesn't pay more money. But what happens is that Walmart's going to have to pay more money.
I think that is the confusion. And because that's been the message throughout the campaign is that it's a tax on a country, it's a tax on a country, it's a tax on a country. People believe that a tariff is a tax on a country. What a tariff is kind of what you're explaining, right?
Yeah.
Like it won't be up to the country, it'll be on the person that is receiving the import.
The person that buys the products from the country.
Ding.
So then, okay, so if a board game goes from $10 to $12 that they have to buy it, now they're going to have to sell it. It's not going to be $18. It's going to be $22 when they sell it.
Yeah.
So that's why everything is going to go up because it's going to cost more money. Now, the another thing that
let me just touch on that. So to like even make it more clear for you, right? Let's use the Walmart example. Let's use the board game, for example. That tariff that comes with the board game, right? Walmart is going to have to have a choice here, right? They're either going to say, we're going to pay this tariff, whatever the percentage is, or we're not going to pay this tariff. And you know who's going to pay it? Our customers. And so when they put that price inside of whatever the product is, you pay more.
Yeah, but they still pay. Even if they pay it, they're still going to pay.
They're still going to pay more.
That's what I'm saying. They have Walmart has to pay it, but the cost is going to be built into the product, which now the product pays more. So then another theory is that, okay, well, this is going to force jobs back to America. Now, on theory, that's not a bad theory.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be non-biased about this conversation.
Yep.
It's not a bad theory because we have outsourced manufacturing for decades, and we are dependent on other countries, and that could lead to problems. Now, but the problem with this theory is that it's going to take a long time. You just can't build 700 factories in 1 month, right? So it's going to take a long time to actually build these factories.
That's the first problem.
That's the first problem.
Yep.
So there's going to be pain in that process. The second problem is that the labor. So I put it on Instagram. The price that it costs to build a car per worker in America is $70.
$70, yep.
The price that it costs in Mexico is like $6 an hour.
Right.
So if you have to pay work, that's why the prices of houses are going up.
Yeah.
Because the amount of money that you can pay an undocumented immigrant is a lot lower than the amount of money that you would have to pay a union construction worker. I'm not saying what's right or wrong, right? That's not the basis of this conversation. I'm just saying that's just the actual fact.
Right.
So if you have to pay somebody more money, once again, where do you think that cost is going to go? That's going to go to the consumer because it's going to cost more money to get the job done. Another thing, like using the auto industry as an example, but this is true to there's companies now that make products in America, auto companies.
Mm-hmm.
There's no auto company that makes products in America that does not ship and receive products from overseas to build the car. So when you build the car, you have to get an engine, you have to get a variety of different
parts.
Those parts come from overseas.
Mm-hmm.
So now if you put tariffs on those parts, it's still going to raise the cost of the car. Mm-hmm. and a variety of other different things. So it's like, okay, well, why can't we get cheap parts made in America? Well, it's a pretty complicated problem, right? Because, well, that goes back to the labor as well.
Yeah.
That goes back to actually having the facilities to actually do it. There's a variety of different things that we've outsourced, and we don't have, let's just be honest, we don't have a labor force that is built to build iPhones. Like nobody wants to sit in a tech sweatshop for 12 hours a day.
This is not right or wrong. This is just literally what's happening. And I saw the statistic and it was like, this makes perfect sense, right? We led with, yes, we are the #1 consuming nation, right? Our GDP is 20%, right, of the world's income. 20% of the world's GDP belongs to the United States, right? We have 5% of the world's population, which means that we're always going to fall short on labor. The other part is that when we have the labor, we can't afford to pay the labor, right? So this is why you outsource jobs. Look at a company like Apple, for example, today, right? Had its worst day since the COVID pandemic started. Why? Well, a lot of the factories and a lot of the products that they manufacture come from China. If you're going to put that heavy of a tax on China, what do you think is going to happen to a company like Apple's products, right? That $900 phone is now going to be $1,500, $1,600, $1,700,
$2,100. And then it's also a thing of by the time they build the factories, robots are going to be doing the jobs anyway. That's cost effective, but that's not helpful as far as getting American jobs. These jobs are not coming back to America because they're outdated anyway. Mm-hmm. Eventually, these jobs are not even going to be done by human beings anyway. So to have a long-term trajectory on a short-term job is not sustainable. Like human beings are not going to be manufacturing cars for too much longer. It doesn't make sense.
Cars, retail products.
When you can have a robot do it, why would you have a human do it?
So there's this bright side, and while I'm watching all of this, knowing that it's like, well, if it's going to be robotics and it's going to be well, we already been speaking about that, right? So the bright side is, yes, there's pain right now, but we can see where the future's headed, right? We can kind of see like there's not going to be a human doing those jobs, right? Whether you're talking about Apple, you're talking about Nike, you're talking about Walmart from a retail or goods side, those jobs are going to be done by robotics. We can agree on that.
Yeah, for sure.
Going forward. And it's more cost effective to do that. So if we think about who's going to pay for the labor, well, if we have machines doing the labor, then that labor cost is going to go down.
The labor cost goes down, but the unemployment. So
Now
the
there
thing
we
is,
go.
the number one thing is like we're going to bring jobs back to America. Well, that's not really bringing jobs back if robots are assembling iPhones and if robots are assembling cars. Where's the jobs?